Emma Rodriguez stood at her desk on the
This
42nd
needs to
floor
be
of Sterling
perfect.
Enterprises, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she coordinated
Great.
meetings across 3 time
Let's
zones.
discuss
The
our
Manhattan
strategy
skyline stretched
moving
beyond the
forward.
floor-to-ceiling windows, but she barely
Look at
noticed
these
anymore.
projections. They're off the charts.
After
This
4
doesn't
years
add
as
up. We need to
executive
verify these
assistant to
numbers.
Julian Ashford, the View had become background noise to the constant rhythm of deadlines, conferences, and corporate emergencies that defined her days. Her phone buzzed with an internal call. She answered immediately, her voice crisp and professional. "Yes, Mr. Ashford." "Emma, I need the Horizon Tech merger documents. The blue folder from my office safe." His voice carried that familiar edge of controlled urgency that meant something had gone wrong. "I'm at the penthouse. Can you bring them within the hour?" She glanced at her watch. It was already 7 in the evening. She had planned to finally catch up on her laundry and maybe watch something mindless on television. But that was the nature of working for one of the youngest and most driven CEOs in New York. Julian Ashford had built Sterling Enterprises from a struggling tech startup into a billion-dollar corporation in just 8 years. And he expected the same level of dedication from everyone around him. "Of course, I'll be there shortly." Emma gathered her things, retrieved the folder from the safe in Julian's corner office, and made her way down to the street. The November air bit at her cheeks as she hailed a cab. During the 20-minute ride to the Upper East Side, she reviewed her mental checklist of everything that needed to happen tomorrow. The merger with Horizon Tech was the biggest deal Sterling had ever attempted, and every detail had to be perfect. The doorman at Julian's building recognized her and waved her through to the private elevator. Emma had been to the penthouse perhaps a dozen times over the years, always on business, always briefly. She knew the space was elegant and minimalist, decorated in shades of gray and white with modern furniture that looked expensive and uncomfortable in equal measure. She knocked twice on the heavy door and waited. Silence. She knocked again, pressing her ear close to listen. Still nothing. Her stomach tightened with concern. Julian had specifically asked her to come, had said it was urgent. She pulled out her phone to call him when she remembered the spare key he had given her 6 months ago, after he had locked himself out during a particularly stressful week. Emma hesitated, her hand hovering over her purse. Using the key felt like a violation of boundaries that she had carefully maintained. But what if something was wrong? She had never known Julian to ignore a summons he himself had made. She retrieved the key and slid it into the lock, turning it slowly. "Mr. Ashford," she called out as she stepped into the entryway. The apartment was dimly lit, only the ambient glow from the city filtering through the massive windows. She moved forward cautiously, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Julian? I have the documents you requested." The sound came from deeper in the apartment, something between a sigh and a groan. Emma's heart rate picked up as she moved toward it, passing through the sterile living room toward what she knew was his home office. The door stood half open, warm light spilling out. She pushed it wider and froze. Julian sat on the floor with his back against the desk, still wearing his suit pants and white dress shirt, though the shirt was partially unbuttoned and the sleeves rolled up. His dark hair, usually perfectly styled, fell across his forehead in disarray. In his hand was a glass of amber liquid, and on the desk above him sat a bottle of expensive whiskey. But what struck Emma most was his face. The carefully controlled mask he always wore had crumbled, revealing raw pain in his deep blue eyes. He looked up at her entrance, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Emma had seen Julian angry, focused, triumphant, even amused on rare occasions. She had never seen him like this, vulnerable and hurting. "The documents," she said softly, holding up the blue folder, unsure what else to say. Julian let out a hollow laugh and took a drink. "Right, the documents. Always about the documents, the deals, the next acquisition." He gestured vaguely at the space beside him. "Put them on the desk. Or better yet, sit down. You're making me feel like I'm being judged from on high." Emma hesitated, then carefully lowered herself to sit on the floor a few feet away from him, smoothing her skirt over her knees. This was so far outside the bounds of their normal interaction that she felt like she was in a dream. "Is everything all right?" "Define all right." He swirled the whiskey in his glass, watching the light play through it. If all right means my father just called to inform me that he's getting remarried for the fourth time, and he expects me to play the dutiful son at the wedding, then yes, everything is perfectly all right. Emma knew very little about Julian's family. He never spoke about them, never had photos in his office, never mentioned holidays or visits. She had assumed the relationship was simply distant, the way many powerful people prioritized work over family. Now she began to understand there was more to the story. "You don't get along with your father," she said. It was not a question. Julian looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time despite 4 years of daily interaction. "My father is a master of moving on. He moves on from wives, from children, from responsibilities. When I was 12, he moved on from my mother and me to pursue a younger woman and a fresh start. He's been moving on ever since. I learned early that the only person you can rely on is yourself." The words hung in the air between them. Emma felt something shift, some invisible wall beginning to crack. She had always known Julian kept everyone at arm's length, always assumed it was simply his personality, the natural reserve of someone who carried enormous responsibility. Now she glimpsed the wound beneath the armor. "That must have been incredibly painful," she said quietly. "Being left behind like that?" He met her eyes again, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "You're the first person in this city who's ever said that to me. Everyone else either pretends it didn't happen or assumes I'm over it because I'm successful now, as if money fixes abandonment." Emma didn't know what to say, so she simply stayed there, present with him in his pain. The silence stretched out, but it was not uncomfortable. Julian took another drink, then set the glass down. "Why did you really come here tonight, Emma?" "The truth." She blinked, surprised by the question. "You called and asked for the documents? I could have had them couriered. I could have waited until tomorrow. But I called you." He leaned his head back against the desk, studying the ceiling. "Do you know why?" Emma shook her head, though he was not looking at her. "Because you're the only constant in my life. Every morning for 4 years, you've been there, organized, capable, somehow managing to anticipate what I need before I know I need it. You've never asked for anything, never pushed for more than I was willing to give, never betrayed a confidence or failed to deliver." He turned to look at her again. "You're the one person I trust completely, and I didn't even realize it until tonight." Emma's heart hammered in her chest. This was dangerous territory. She worked for him. She depended on this job. But something in his honesty called to her own buried truths. "You're not the only one who learned to rely only on yourself," she heard herself say. "I grew up in foster care. 7 different homes before I aged out of the system. I learned that stability is something you create, not something you're given." Understanding passed between them, recognition of shared wounds. Julian reached out, his hand covering hers where it rested on the floor between them. His touch was warm, grounding. "We're a pair, aren't we? Both of us building walls to keep out the pain." Emma looked down at their joined hands, felt the heat spreading up her arm. "Walls serve a purpose," she whispered. "They keep us safe, or they keep us alone." Julian's thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. "I'm tired of being alone, Emma. I'm tired of pretending that success fills the emptiness." She should pull away. She should stand up, hand him the folder, and leave with her professionalism intact. Instead, Emma found herself moving closer, drawn by the rawness of his confession, by the genuine need in his voice. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I notice you. I notice the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. I notice how you take your coffee with exactly 2 sugars and a splash of cream. I notice that you wear your hair down on Fridays because it's the end of the week and you allow yourself that small rebellion against corporate expectations." He lifted his free hand to tuck a strand of her dark hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I'm saying that somewhere along the way, you stopped being just my assistant and became the person I most want to see every day." Emma's breath came faster. She knew she should stop this, should restore the boundaries that were crumbling between them. But for years of professional distance, of suppressing her own attraction to this complicated, brilliant man, suddenly felt like too much to maintain for even one more moment. This could ruin everything, she whispered. Or it could be the beginning of something real. Julian leaned closer, his eyes searching hers for permission, for acceptance. She closed the remaining distance and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, both of them testing the reality of what was happening.
Then Julian's hand cupped the back of her head, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened into something urgent and necessary. Emma felt 4 years of tension and unspoken longing pour into that contact, felt the walls they had both built beginning to shake. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Emma rested her forehead against his. What happens now? Julian's arms came around her, holding her close. I don't know. But for the first time in years, I want to find out. They sat there on the floor of his office, wrapped in each other, as the city lights glittered beyond the windows and the merger documents lay forgotten on the desk above them. Emma knew that tomorrow would bring complications, questions, and difficult choices. But tonight, she allowed herself to simply be held by someone who understood her wounds because he carried his own. Tonight, the walls came down. The days following that night in Julian's penthouse felt like living in two parallel realities. At the office, Emma and Julian maintained their professional relationship with careful precision. She still called him Mr. Ashford in front of others, still organized his schedule with the same efficiency, still kept the appropriate distance during meetings. But there were moments when their eyes would meet across a conference room, when his hand would brush hers as he passed her a document, when the air between them would crackle with unspoken memory. They had not spoken about what happened, had not defined what they were to each other now. Emma told herself it was a one-time lapse in judgment, a moment of weakness they would both pretend never occurred. But late at night, alone in a small apartment in Brooklyn, she would remember the feel of his arms around her, the vulnerability in his voice, and know that something fundamental had changed. 3 weeks after that evening, Julian called her into his office and closed the door behind her. Emma's pulse quickened as he moved to stand before her, his expression serious. The Miami Tech conference is next week. I need you to come with me. 3 days, all expenses covered. His tone was professional, but his eyes held a question that had nothing to do with business. Emma knew what he was really asking. 3 days away from New York, away from the office and its watchful eyes. 3 days where they could explore whatever this was between them without the weight of corporate hierarchy pressing down on them. She should decline, should suggest he take Robert from marketing instead. She should protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak of getting involved with a man who had built his life around emotional distance. When do we leave? She heard herself say. Julian's shoulders relaxed slightly, a small smile touching his lips. Monday morning. 6 a.m. flight. The conference was being held at a luxury resort in South Beach, all white marble and ocean views. Sterling Enterprises had booked an entire floor for their executives and key staff. Emma's room was elegant and spacious, with a balcony overlooking the Atlantic. She tried not to think about where Julian's room was located, tried to focus on reviewing the conference schedule and preparing materials for his presentations. The first day passed in a blur of keynote speeches and networking sessions. Julian was in his element, commanding attention as he spoke about the future of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Emma watched from the side of the ballroom, pride swelling in her chest at his brilliance, at the way he could captivate hundreds of people with his vision. This was the man the world saw, confident and untouchable. That evening, after the formal dinner, Emma returned to her room and changed into comfortable clothes. She was reaching for the room service menu when a knock came at her door. Through the peephole, she saw Julian standing in the hallway, still wearing his suit though he had loosened his tie. She opened the door. Is something wrong? Can I come in? His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. Emma stepped aside, and he entered, moving to stand by the balcony doors. The city lights of Miami glittered beyond the glass, and the distant sound of music and laughter drifted up from the beach below. I can't stop thinking about you, Julian said without turning around. I've tried. God knows I've tried. I tell myself all the reasons this is a bad idea, all the ways it could complicate everything. But then I see you across a room, and nothing else matters. Emma's heart thundered in her chest. She moved closer, stopping just behind him. I'm scared, she admitted. You're my boss. You hold my entire career in your hands. If this goes wrong, I lose everything. He turned to face her then, and the raw emotion in his eyes stole her breath. You think I'm not terrified? I've spent 8 years building Sterling Enterprises into what it is today. I've sacrificed relationships, friendships, any semblance of a normal life. And now here you are, making me want things I convinced myself I didn't need. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. But I'm more scared of never knowing what we could be. Emma leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. If we do this, we have to be careful. Discreet. The company has policies about workplace relationships, especially between supervisors and subordinates. I know. We'll figure it out. Julian's thumb traced her jawline. Right now, I just need to know if you feel this too, or if I'm alone in this madness. She opened her eyes and looked at him, this powerful man who somehow managed to be vulnerable only with her. You're not alone. He kissed her then, and it was different from that first kiss on his office floor. This was not born of pain and loneliness but of genuine desire and growing affection. Emma melted into him, her hands sliding up his chest to loop around his neck. Julian's arms encircled her waist, pulling her flush against him as the kiss deepened. They moved to the bed, a tangle of limbs and whispered words. Julian was tender and attentive, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch into his touch. Emma discovered that beneath his controlled exterior was a passionate man who had been starving for real connection. They made love slowly, savoring each moment, each revelation of skin and sensation. Afterward, they lay wrapped together, the ocean breeze drifting through the partially open balcony door. Julian traced patterns on Emma's bare shoulder, his expression thoughtful. My father called again yesterday, he said quietly. He wants me to give a speech at his wedding, something about family and new beginnings. The irony is not lost on me. Emma turned to look at him. What did you tell him? I told him no. For the first time in my life, I told him no. Julian's voice held a note of wonder. I told him that I am done pretending we have a relationship built on anything other than obligation and his guilt. I told him that family is something you build through presence and commitment, not through blood and performative gestures. How did he respond? Julian laughed, though there was no humor in it. He was shocked, of course. Tried to guilt me about disappointing him. But I realized something, Emma. He doesn't have power over me anymore. The scared 12-year-old boy who desperately wanted his father's approval doesn't exist anymore. I survived his abandonment and built something meaningful from the ashes. Emma pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. I'm proud of you. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's warmth. When Emma woke in the early hours of the morning, she allowed herself to imagine what a future with Julian might look like. Not just stolen moments in hotel rooms, but something real and lasting. She pushed the fantasy away, reminding herself to stay grounded in reality. But hope had already taken root. The second day of the conference brought unexpected crisis. During lunch, Julian received an urgent call from the Sterling Enterprises board. There had been a security breach in one of their client databases, potentially exposing sensitive information. Julian's face went pale as he listened, his jaw clenching with each revelation. We need to contain this immediately, he said, standing abruptly. Emma, cancel everything for the rest of the day. We are working from the hotel. They spent the next 16 hours in his suite, coordinating with the IT department in New York, drafting statements for the press, personally calling affected clients. Emma worked alongside Julian, anticipating needs, managing communications, keeping him focused when the stress threatened to overwhelm him. She ordered food that he barely touched, made coffee that he drank mechanically, and at one point simply stood behind his chair and massaged the tension from his shoulders until some of the tightness in his spine released. At 3 in the morning, they finally had the situation under control. The breach had been contained, clients had been notified, and a plan was in place for enhanced security measures. Julian slumped back in his chair, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. I couldn't have done this without you, he said, reaching for Emma's hand. You're not just my assistant, Emma. You're my partner in all of this. You understand the business as well as I do, you think 3 steps ahead, you keep me grounded when I start to spiral. I don't know how I ever managed before you. Emma squeezed his hand, warmth spreading through her chest. We make a good team. The best team. Julian pulled her onto his lap, wrapping his arms around her. When we get back to New York, I want to talk about your role at the company. You should be a vice president at minimum, maybe chief of staff. You've earned it 1,000 times over. She stiffened slightly in his arms. People will think it's because of this, because of us. Let them think what they want. You've been working at an executive level for years while being paid and titled as an assistant. That's on me for not recognizing it sooner. He tilted her chin up to meet his eyes. I won't let our relationship hold you back from what you deserve. Emma wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that they could navigate the complexities of workplace romance and professional advancement. But a small voice in her head whispered warnings about how quickly things could unravel, how easily she could lose everything she had worked for. The flight back to New York was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. As the plane descended toward LaGuardia, Julian took Emma's hand beneath the armrest where no one could see. Whatever happens, we face it together. Okay. She nodded, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. Together. They returned to the office the following day, slipping back into their professional roles. But everything felt different now. Emma was hyper-aware of every glance, every interaction, wondering if their colleagues could sense the shift between them. She noticed the way Jennifer from accounting watched them during the Monday meeting, the whispered conversation between two junior executives when she passed their desks. A week later, Emma woke at 5 in the morning with violent nausea. She barely made it to the bathroom before she was sick. For a moment, she sat on the cold tile floor, trying to remember what she had eaten the previous day that might have caused food poisoning. Then a different thought occurred to her, one that made her blood run cold. She checked her phone calendar, scrolling back through the weeks. Her period was late. Very late. Panic seized her chest as she counted the days since Miami, since that first night in Julian's arms. They had been careful, or at least she thought they had. But apparently not careful enough. Emma showered and dressed mechanically, her mind racing. This could not be happening. Not now, not when everything with Julian was still so new and undefined. Not when her career was finally gaining the recognition she deserved. She stopped at a pharmacy on her way to work and bought 3 different pregnancy tests, shoving them deep into her purse. At the office, she went through the motions of her day, responding to emails, coordinating meetings, reviewing contracts. Julian noticed her distraction during their morning briefing. Are you feeling alright? You look pale. I'm fine, she lied. Just didn't sleep well. He studied her for a moment longer, concern evident in his eyes, but accepted her explanation. Emma made it through the day somehow, and as soon as she returned to her apartment that evening, she locked herself in the bathroom with the pregnancy tests. 5 minutes later, she stared at 3 positive results lined up on the counter. Pregnant. She was pregnant with Julian Ashford's child. Emma sank down onto the edge of the bathtub, her hands shaking. Terror and wonder warred within her. A baby. She was going to have a baby. Part of her had always wanted children someday, but someday had been a distant concept, something that would happen after she was established in her career, after she found the right partner, after everything was stable and secure. Now someday was in 7.5 months, and nothing about her situation was stable. She and Julian had been together for less than a month. They had not discussed the future beyond vague acknowledgements that they cared for each other. They had not told anyone about their relationship. And now she was carrying his child. Emma did not go to work the next day. She called in sick, which was not entirely untrue given the nausea that had become her constant companion. She spent the day curled on her couch, trying to imagine how to tell Julian, trying to imagine what his reaction would be. Would he be happy? Angry? Would he think she had trapped him? Would he want her to terminate the pregnancy? That last thought made her wrap her arms protectively around her still flat stomach. Whatever Julia's reaction, she already knew she wanted this baby. It terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure, but the decision was already made in her heart. She was still sitting there when her phone rang. Julia's name appeared on the screen. She considered not answering, but that would only delay the inevitable. Hello? Emma, what's wrong? And don't tell me nothing, because I know you too well. You never take sick days, and you didn't answer any of my messages. His voice held genuine worry and something else, something that sounded almost like fear. Can you come over? Emma asked quietly. We need to talk. The silence on the other end stretched for several heartbeats. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Emma used the time to wash her face, change into clean clothes, and arrange the pregnancy test on her coffee table. When Julian knocked, she opened the door to find him disheveled and breathless, as if he had run all the way from Manhattan. What's going on? Talk to me. He reached for her, but she stepped back, needing space for this conversation. Come in. Sit down. Julian followed her into the small living room, his eyes scanning her face, her apartment, looking for clues. Then his gaze fell on the coffee table and the 3 white plastic sticks arranged there. Emma watched as understanding dawned, watched his face go pale, watched his hands begin to tremble. Are those what I think they are? His voice came out hoarse. I'm pregnant, Julian. About 5 weeks, I think. From Miami. He sat down heavily on the couch, staring at the tests as if they might disappear if he looked at them long enough. Emma remained standing, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to read his reaction. Say something, she whispered. Julian looked up at her, and the expression on his face was impossible to decipher. You're pregnant. We're going to have a baby. I'm going to have a baby, Emma corrected gently. You don't have to be involved if you don't want to be. I know this wasn't part of the plan, that we never discussed this possibility. I can handle it on my own if that's what you prefer. His eyes widened, then narrowed, a flash of something that looked like pain crossing his features. You think I would abandon my child? You think I would walk away from you when you're carrying my baby? I don't know what to think, Julian. We've been together for a month. 1 month. We barely know each other outside of work. And now we are looking at becoming parents. Emma's voice cracked, the stress and fear of the past day finally breaking through her composure. I'm terrified. I don't know how to do this. Julian stood and crossed to her in 2 long strides, pulling her into his arms. We figure it out together, just like we said. I'm not going anywhere, Emma. I promise you that. She let herself be held, let the tears finally fall. What if we can't make this work? What if this ruins everything? Or what if this is exactly what we needed? Julian pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. I know the timing is terrible. I know we have 1,000 complications to work through. But Emma, when I look at those tests, I don't feel trapped. I feel hope. Real hope for something beyond boardrooms and profit margins and empty success. You're not angry. Surprised, yes. Scared, absolutely. But angry? Never. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. We're going to have a baby. Our baby. Emma felt some of the tension in her chest ease. I need to resign from Sterling Enterprises. There's no way I can continue working as your assistant while pregnant with your child. The gossip alone would be unbearable. Julian's jaw tightened. I won't let you sacrifice your career because of this. It's not a sacrifice. It's the practical reality. Emma moved to sit on the couch, suddenly exhausted. I've been thinking about it all day. I'll resign with a standard notice period, and we'll keep the relationship and pregnancy private for as long as possible. That way people won't immediately connect the 2 events. No. Julia's voice was firm. I have a better idea. What if we got married? Emma stared at him, certain she had misheard. Excuse me. Married. You and me. Before anyone knows about the baby, before the rumors start, before any of this becomes complicated. He sat beside her, taking her hands. I know it's fast. I know it's not the romantic proposal you probably imagined. But Emma, I care about you deeply. I want to build a life with you. Why not start now? Because marriage is supposed to be about love, not damage control, Emma said softly. I won't trap you into a relationship you don't really want. Julian's expression softened. Who says I don't want it? Emma, I've been alone by choice for years. I've had relationships that were purely physical, arrangements that were convenient. But with you, it's different. You see me, really see me, and you don't run away. You challenge me. You make me want to be a better man. Maybe I'm not saying it in the most romantic way, but yes, I want to marry you. I want us to be a family. Emma searched his face, looking for doubt or hesitation. What she found instead was sincerity and determination. This is insane. Probably. But some of the best decisions are made without overthinking. He squeezed her hands. Marry me, Emma Rodriguez. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of you and our child. She should say no. She should insist they take time to figure out their relationship before making such a permanent commitment. But as Emma looked at Julian, at the hope and vulnerability in his eyes, she realized that maybe the most practical choice was also the one her heart wanted. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Julian pulled her into a kiss that tasted of promise and new beginnings. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. We'll do this right. Small ceremony, just us and a couple of witnesses. Then we'll announce the marriage and the pregnancy together. The board can't object to me having a pregnant wife, even if that wife used to be my assistant. Emma laughed, the sound watery but genuine. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. You, me, and the little one. Everything else is just details. They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking about the future in concrete terms for the first time. Emma would transition out of her assistant role into a consulting position with the company, working from home on special projects. They would find a larger apartment, something suitable for a family. Julian would scale back his travel schedule, delegate more responsibilities to his vice presidents. As midnight approached and they lay tangled together on Emma's small couch, she allowed herself to believe that maybe this could work. Maybe two people who had learned early that the world was cruel and unstable could build something lasting together. Maybe their brokenness could somehow fit together into something whole. I love you, Julian said suddenly into the darkness. I know I should have said it earlier, should have made this about more than practicality. But I do love you, Emma. I think I've been falling in love with you since the first day you walked into my office and reorganized my entire filing system without being asked. Emma smiled against his chest, feeling the tears well up again, but this time from happiness. I love you too. Even when you're impossible and demanding and work too many hours. Especially then, he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, facing an uncertain future but facing it together. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, unaware that somewhere in Brooklyn, two people were rewriting the rules of their lives and daring to hope for something real. Emma's resignation from Sterling Enterprises became effective 2 weeks later, though the official story was that she was transitioning to a consultant role to pursue other professional opportunities. The morning of her last day as Julian's assistant, she arrived early to clean out her desk and organize files for her replacement. The office was quiet, most of her colleagues not yet arrived, and Emma found herself unexpectedly emotional as she packed away 4 years of her professional life. She had just sealed the last box when Julian appeared in her doorway, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He passed her one, their fingers brushing in the exchange, and she saw the same sadness in his eyes that she felt in her chest. End of an era, he said quietly. Beginning of a new one, Emma reminded him, her free hand moving unconsciously to her stomach, still flat beneath her blouse. At 7 weeks pregnant, the only evidence of the baby was the persistent nausea and exhaustion that plagued her mornings. Julian's gaze followed her gesture, a soft smile transforming his usually serious expression. Have you thought more about when you want to get married? They had decided on a small ceremony at City Hall, just the 2 of them and 2 witnesses. No family, no co-workers, nothing that would draw attention or speculation. It felt rushed and secretive, but Emma had made peace with the unconventional nature of their situation. Sometimes love did not follow a predictable timeline. This weekend, she said. Before I start showing, before the rumors begin. Let's just do it. This weekend it is. Julian set down his coffee and pulled her into his arms, not caring who might see through the glass walls of her small office. You're sure about this? About all of it? Emma looked up at him, at the man who had somehow become her entire world in a matter of months. I've never been more sure of anything. The wedding took place on Saturday morning. Emma wore a simple cream dress she had found in a boutique in Soho, and Julian looked devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit. His friend Robert from the legal department served as one witness, and Emma had asked her former college roommate, Claire, to stand with her. The ceremony itself lasted less than 15 minutes, but when the clerk pronounced them husband and wife, Emma felt the weight of permanence settle over her like a warm blanket. They celebrated with lunch at a quiet restaurant in Greenwich Village, just the 4 of them, before Robert and Claire discreetly departed to give the newlyweds privacy. Julian had booked a suite at the plaza for their wedding night, and as they rode the elevator up to their room, Emma felt nerves flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with morning sickness. Mrs. Ashford, Julian said, testing out the name. How does it feel? Strange. Good. Terrifying. Emma laughed, leaning into him. Ask me again in a year. The suite was elegant, all soft lighting and luxury furnishings, with a massive bed that dominated the room. Julian poured them each a glass of sparkling cider, since Emma could not drink alcohol, and they toasted to their future. To us, Julian said, his eyes never leaving hers. To facing everything together. To building something real, Emma added. They made love slowly that night, savoring each touch, each whispered endearment. Julian was impossibly gentle with her, his hands reverent as they traced the still subtle changes in her body. Afterward, as they lay wrapped together in the expensive sheets, Emma felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as partners, as a team. The following Monday, Julian called an emergency meeting with the Sterling Enterprises Board of Directors. Emma sat in the conference room beside him, her new wedding ring catching the light, and watched as he took control of the narrative before rumors could. I've asked you all year to share important personal news, Julian began, his voice steady and authoritative. Emma and I were married this weekend. Additionally, we are expecting our first child in early summer. The reaction was immediate. Shocked faces, whispered conversations, and from the head of human resources, a stern expression that suggested legal complications. Emma kept her spine straight, her expression neutral, refusing to show the anxiety that churned beneath her composure. Thomas Bradley, the oldest member of the board and Julian's mentor, was the first to speak. Julian, this is highly irregular. Emma was your direct report until just 2 weeks ago. The optics of this situation are problematic at best. I am aware of the optics, Julian replied calmly. Which is why Emma resigned before our relationship became serious, and why we're being transparent now rather than trying to hide it. We violated no company policies, and Emma will not be returning to any position at Sterling Enterprises that reports to me. But she will be returning, another board member asked, looking between them with obvious suspicion. In a consulting capacity, working on special projects. She'll report directly to the board on those assignments, not to me. Julian's hand found Emma's beneath the table, squeezing gently. Emma has been an invaluable asset to this company for 4 years. Her knowledge and expertise should not be lost simply because our relationship has evolved. The meeting continued for another hour, with the board expressing concerns about potential lawsuits, accusations of favoritism, and damage to the company's reputation. Through it all, Julian remained calm and rational, addressing each concern with prepared arguments and legal precedents. Emma said little, knowing that her presence was primarily to show unity with Julian, to demonstrate that they were serious about their commitment. When they finally left the conference room, Emma felt drained. That went better than I expected, she admitted as they rode the elevator down to the parking garage. They'll come around. Thomas likes you, and he essentially controls the board. Once he sees that we're stable and not a liability, the others will follow. Julian pulled her close as the elevator descended. Besides, we have more important things to worry about. Like finding a place to live that has room for a nursery. They spent the next few weeks apartment hunting, looking at spacious lofts in Tribeca and brownstones in Brooklyn Heights. Emma found herself drawn to a renovated townhouse near Prospect Park, with high ceilings, abundant natural light, and a small garden in back. Julian loved it too, and they made an offer the same day. As Emma entered her second trimester, the nausea finally subsided, replaced by a surge of energy and growing excitement about the baby. They told Julian's mother about the marriage and pregnancy during a tense dinner at her home in Connecticut. Margaret Ashford's reaction was cool and measured, her approval clearly conditional on whether this marriage would last. I hope you know what you're doing, Julian, she said over dessert, her eyes sharp as she studied Emma. Marriage is difficult enough without adding a baby into the mix so quickly. We know exactly what we're doing, Julian replied, his jaw tight. And I'd appreciate your support rather than your skepticism. Margaret's expression softened slightly. I just don't want to see you hurt again. After Stephania. Emma is nothing like Stephania, Julian cut her off, his hand finding Emma's. Emma is kind, loyal, and she sees me as a person, not a bank account. I'm lucky she agreed to marry me. Emma squeezed his hand, grateful for his defense but also understanding Margaret's concerns. To an outsider, their relationship did look suspicious. Emma had been Julian's employee, financially dependent on him for her livelihood, and now she was pregnant and married to one of New York's wealthiest men. The power imbalance was obvious even if their actual relationship was more complicated than it appeared. After they left Margaret's house, Emma was quiet during the drive back to Manhattan. Julian noticed, as he always did, and pulled over into a rest stop halfway home. Talk to me, he said, turning to face her in the darkness of the car. What's going on in that beautiful head of yours? Emma sighed, her hands resting on the small bump that was beginning to show beneath her clothes. Do you ever worry that people will think I married you for your money? That I got pregnant on purpose to trap you? I don't care what people think. But I do. I care that your mother clearly thinks I'm some kind of gold digger. I care that half the people at Sterling Enterprises probably believe I slept my way into a consulting position. Her voice cracked. I care that our child will grow up hearing whispers about how their parents got together. Julian unbuckled his seat belt and shifted to cup her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen to me. Anyone who knows you, really knows you, understands that you're brilliant and hardworking and you earn every opportunity you've ever received. Anyone who believes otherwise is not worth our energy. But your mother. My mother is protective and jaded because my father put her through hell. She'll come around once she sees how happy we are, how committed we are to each other and to this baby. He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. I love you, Emma Ashford. Nothing anyone says or thinks will change that. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, almost making her more emotional than usual. I love you too. I just want to prove that I am worthy of being your wife. You already have. Every single day. They drove the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, and when they reached their temporary apartment, Julian spent the evening showing Emma exactly how much he loved and desired her, until all her worries dissolved into pleasure and connection. The weeks turned into months. Emma's belly grew rounder, the baby's kicks becoming stronger and more frequent. They learned they were having a daughter during the 20-week ultrasound, and Julian wept as he watched her tiny form moving on the screen. They painted the nursery in the new townhouse a soft lavender, assembled furniture, and debated names late into the night. Work continued at Sterling Enterprises, though Emma's consulting role kept her mostly home-based. She was developing a new employee wellness program, comprehensive policies for parental leave and childcare support, initiatives that Julian championed enthusiastically. Emma poured herself into the project, determined to make Sterling Enterprises a model for family-friendly corporate culture. But not everything was smooth. 3 months into their marriage, Julian's father called requesting a meeting. Emma was 5 months pregnant, obviously showing, when they met Lawrence Ashford at an upscale restaurant in Midtown. Julian's father was a silver-haired man in his 60s, still handsome, with the same piercing blue eyes as his son. His new wife, a woman who looked barely 30, hung on his arm with a practiced smile. Julian, my boy, you're looking well, Lawrence said, his voice booming with false warmth. And this must be your lovely bride. Congratulations on the baby. Emma felt Julian tense beside her, saw the muscle jump in his jaw. What do you want, Dad? Lawrence's smile never faltered. Can't a father want to reconnect with his son? Especially when said son is about to make him a grandfather. You lost the right to play the doting father when I was 12, Julian replied coldly. So I'll ask again, what do you want? The mask slipped, and Lawrence's expression turned calculating. I'm starting a new venture, a tech startup that needs capital. I thought perhaps Sterling Enterprises might be interested in investing. Family supporting family, you understand. No. Julian's response was immediate. Whatever business proposal you have can go through the standard channels. I'm not giving you money because we share DNA. Lawrence's eyes narrowed. Still holding grudges, I see. Your mother really did poison you against me. My mother didn't need to poison me. You did that all by yourself when you chose your secretary over your family. Julian stood, helping Emma to her feet. We're done here. Don't contact me again unless you're prepared to have a real conversation, one that starts with an apology and actual accountability for your choices. As they left the restaurant, Emma could feel Julian shaking with suppressed anger. She waited until they were in the car before speaking. Are you okay? No. But I will be. He took a deep breath, visibly trying to calm himself. I'm sorry you had to witness that. Don't apologize. That's your father, and he's clearly manipulative. Emma placed his hand on her belly, where their daughter was actively kicking. Feel that. That's your real family right there. You don't owe that man anything. Julian's expression softened as he felt his daughter's movements. Thank you. For being here, for understanding. For giving me a chance to be the father I never had. You're going to be an amazing dad, Emma said with certainty. Because you know exactly what not to do. The confrontation with Lawrence seemed to be a turning point for Julian. He became even more present, even more committed to building a life that was about more than corporate success. He cut back his hours at work, made it home for dinner most nights, and spent weekends attending childbirth classes and building baby furniture. Emma's water broke on a Tuesday afternoon in early June, 3 weeks before her due date. She had been working on her laptop in the nursery when she felt a sudden gush of fluid. Panic and excitement flooded through her in equal measure as she called Julian. "It's time. The baby's coming." Julian arrived home in record time, his face pale but determined. He grabbed the hospital bag they had packed weeks earlier and helped Emma to the car. The drive to Mount Sinai Hospital felt both endless and too short, Emma breathing through contractions while Julian held her hand and whispered encouragement. Labor was long and difficult. 18 hours of pain and exhaustion, of Emma crying that she could not do it, and Julian telling her she was the strongest person he knew. When their daughter finally entered the world at 6 in the morning, screaming and perfect, Emma felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of love. "She's here," Julian whispered, tears streaming down his face as the nurse placed their daughter on Emma's chest. "Our little girl is here." Emma cradled the tiny, squirming body, overwhelmed by the rush of fierce protective love. "Hi, sweetheart. We've been waiting for you." They named her Sophie Margaret Ashford, a combination of Emma's grandmother's name and Julian's mother, an olive branch extended despite their complicated relationship. Sophie had Julian's blue eyes and Emma's dark hair, and from the moment she was born, she had both her parents completely wrapped around her tiny fingers. The first few weeks of parenthood were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, of learning Sophie's cries and rhythms. Julian was a hands-on father, changing diapers and walking Sophie around the townhouse at 3 in the morning, singing off-key lullabies that made Emma smile. They figured it out together, sometimes fumbling but always united. Margaret Ashford came to visit when Sophie was 2 weeks old. Emma watched nervously as Julian's mother held her grand.